Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And today we are going to be talking about a Slate Star Codex post, as we sometimes do, because they're awesome. But before we do that, we're going to do our Less Wrong posts, because we do those at the top of the show now.
Yes, we do. So, first one is guessing the teacher's password, right?
No, fake explanations.
Damn it.
Although the two of them are so, I almost feel like they should be one post because they're so reliant on each other. When I read fake explanations, I was like, isn't this guessing the teacher's password? But then I read guessing the teacher's password and I was like, oh no, okay, it's the lead into it.
Yeah, I think that on occasion, maybe he had posts drafted and he's like, I don't feel like I'm going to have time tomorrow. I can split this into two.
Yeah. It's one of the nice things about blogging.
And it's also the nice thing about writing serial fiction. I noticed, I was talking about this with Brian, I don't know if it was on the air or not, so I don't mind repeating it. And I know we're already off topic, but I do another podcast called We Want More, which is like a We've Got Ward ripoff where my co-host Brian hasn't read the book and I have, so we're going through it section, a couple chapters at a time. And if you look at the release dates for chapters, there are several where he released 3 in one day, and then 5 in a week.
Oh, you did mention this.
Then a couple months off, and then a fucking year off. And I wonder if he had just staggered his releases and say, I'm going to do 2 a week.
Or
if
even
it
one
worked
week.
a little smoother. Yeah, or just 1 a week. I mean, 1 a week they'd still be coming out, right?
No, there were only 132. That's 2 years. 2.5.
Yeah, I guess you're right. In any case, maybe it might have even taken less time than it took, but it still would have left some more buffer. But I think probably the reason is that his writing process was more of, I'm doing this to jumpstart my writing, not as a project to release a story. So
Well, he also apparently ran into a hard problem of how to advance to the next plot point that he wanted to do after Azkaban, and pretty much the entire Spew arc was him trying to get to a point where Hermione would attack Draco and have that be believable. And then as he was finishing up the Spew arc, he was like, oh, I can do the Mr. Hatton cloak Groundhog Day attack and fix that in a single scene. And he did, and it was wonderful. And I'm not sad that he did the Spew arc, because I love the Spew arc and I think it's a lot of fun, but it's very incongruous with the rest of the fic. It doesn't quite fit,
It fits more with the earlier theme of the fic, where it was
Yeah.
kind of slapstick, but the thing I liked about it was that it addressed the weird thing that a lot of fiction does now, where it's got we're gonna pretend that sexism and racism doesn't exist in this world, but you'll notice that there's still more male teachers than female teachers at Hogwarts, and so Hermione notices this. Well, she, at first, is trying to bring on the full feminist movement in the wizarding world.
Yeah.
And then they kind of are protesting and start talking to some of the kids, and it's oh wait, you mean actually people are pretty equal in the wizarding world? Yeah. Wait, you muggles discriminate against each other based on skin color?
Yes.
Skin color?
That was a cool scene.
It's, yeah.
Speaking of
That
digression...
was
Oh, go ahead.
no, actually, I was going to do more digression, so you should do your digression, because I already did my digression.
Well, because Steven basically let us off with that digression. Are you guys familiar with Time to Crate?
no.
Time to what?
Crate?
Like a crate, like a box?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I've never heard of this.
It used to be a metric for first-person shooters after Doom and Quake were big things, and everybody and their brother was making their own first-person shooter. A popular metric, this is kind of like the Bechdel test in that it was, basically a joke, is that you can tell how bad a first-person shooter is by how long it takes you to get to your first crate, because the crate is just a standard cube with a skin thrown on it. It is where the level designer has completely run out of ideas and motivation, and is just being like, hey, I'm lazy. There's an object here in your way. It's a crate. And so time to crate was supposed to be, sort of a proxy for how bad something is. And famously, there is a game with a negative time to crate because you see one in the intro cutscene before you even get to be control the character. But I was just thinking we should start having a time to digression metric for our episodes. And this one will probably have the shortest one yet.
Yeah, I'll take full ownership of that. Is the crate like a crate with like a new weapon in it, or something you have to break to get past, or what?
Literally any crate at all, but usually they were just objects that you could like hide behind and move around and, block line of sight, that kind of thing.
It's just a square.
It's just a square. Well, a cube.
It's the
I can see
easiest
that
thing to
being
make in a 3D modeler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I can see that being a joke as the thing, because like especially in first-person shooters, those serve a lot of purpose.
And
if you're like, here's how the cover system works, like that should happen in the tutorial.
yes, but you're also supposed to, put some effort into things. So instead of just like dropping a crate into in front of a player, make it something atmospheric in your level.
Okay, I was mainly rationalizing because I felt like the crates that are in the opening chamber of Breath of the Wild were aptly placed and it didn't bring the game down, but because they're atmospheric, they were dusty and they were old, it fits perfectly, so my game is preserved. All right.
Breath of the Wild had a lot of good crates, actually.
It did.
They
But
textured
those-
squares really well.
I mean, then they just
real good squares.
then they just completely jumped the shark with Minecraft, where literally everything is a cube.
Yeah, I wonder what the time to crate would be for Minecraft.
Don't you have to
-1.
create your own crate though? Like it has to be an actual crate.
I don't know. I have not actually played Minecraft.
I played it for about 5 minutes, and I was like, yeah, this isn't the game for me.
I put maybe several hours or some small tens of hours into it. I had a good time with it. Never got full-fledged, but let's reduce the time to get to fake explanations.
Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, let's jump right in here.
once upon a time, there was an instructor who taught physics students. One day, the instructor called them into the classroom, showed them a wide, square plate of metal next to a hot radiator. The students each put their hands on a plate and found the side next to the radiator to be cool, the distant side was warm. And the instructor said, "Why do you think that happens?" Some students guessed convection of air currents, others guessed strange metals in the plate. They devised many creative explanations, none stooping so low as to say, "I don't know," or "This seems impossible." And the answer was, maybe, what were you going to say, Anish?
Oh, well, go ahead and give the answer spoiler.
And the answer was, before the students entered the room, the instructor turned the plate around.
Yeah, and this is kind of like famous in rationalist circles now. First of all, because it's sort of like a great gotcha, right? But I feel
Kind of, go on, but
well, I feel like it's a little unfair that he says none stooped so low as to say I don't know or this seems impossible, because like that might be something you would say in a more normal setting, but like when the teacher has presented you with this challenge, you assume first of all that there is an answer, and that it is an answer you can deduce because the teacher has given you this challenge, right? It's like, here is an exercise
Yeah.
for the student, please figure it out. So they were like guessing and trying to, well, that's the thing, they were guessing as opposed to trying to figure it out, which is why this is so closely linked to guessing the teacher's password, which is the next post. But so like I felt like it was a little unfair, but it really, he makes a damn good point about how much guessing there was being done and how schools are being. You know what? I'm going to stop right there before I spoil the next one. Go ahead, Stephen.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say that if like to be pedantic, the teacher in the real world could be nature, and in this particular case, there was an answer, and they could have guessed it. They could have said, "Okay, I feel like I was asked the wrong question." Now, granted, that's not how things work in school. They usually ask you questions with straightforward answers based on what you've learned. I don't know if this might be like, is this an apocryphal story or does it have a citation? It doesn't actually matter, but
It was once
like,
upon a time, dude.
so once upon a time, so it could be the sort of thing. I'm trying to think of an example like that could have come up in any formal education I had, since I didn't take high level physics courses. It seems like a good way to get like to train the student to say, yes, sometimes things are confusing, and it is okay to say I don't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
I think
think.
that's the exact point that Eliezer's trying to make is that, like, I was actually going to basically say what both of you had said. Ineash, you were talking about how you don't think it's fair to the student, and I agree because you are not like that's not the way schools work. You're
Right.
not actually being asked to think. You're being asked to like memorize stuff for the test. Not always, but just like there's so much what is the word, accountability, I guess, that teachers are held to, that they don't have a lot of time to develop good curricula, and they spend all their time, attending meetings, grading tests, and then like having to be evaluated forever.
And like teaching it, like they're evaluated on like passing scores of their students to tests that they didn't get to write more often than not, right? So
I
the
think
state or
so.
the district writes these tests, and it's like, okay, well, I feel like this is the worst way and worst order in which to teach college algebra, but that's the way I was told to do it. So good luck, kids.
I gotta.
I think that's the. Sorry, what?
Oh, I gotta say that this mythical teacher is a darn good teacher though, because he is probably for the first time in these students' lives exposing them to the idea that like, hey, you shouldn't just be trying to figure out the correct answer for the test. Maybe you should actually think about things like your teacher's a dick and flipped it before you came in here.
Yeah.
Or your teacher's trying to make you think,
I feel,
which might be a dick move.
some of my teachers were trying to make me think. It was I had some pretty decent teachers. Not all of them, but a few.
Yeah, I had a real mix of good and bad ones. Um,
So Eliezer says that to consider the answer the student gave of maybe because of heat conduction. He says, I ask, is this answer a proper belief? Do the words actually control anticipation? If you say heat conduction, what experience does that lead you to anticipate? Under normal circumstances, it leads you to anticipate that if you put your hand on the side of the plate near the radiator, that side will feel warmer than the opposite side. So he points out that you, in terms of that phrase, you should ponder the little innocent phrase "because of," which comes before heat conduction. Ponder some of the other things we could put after it. We could say, for example, because of phlogiston or because of magic. Because of heat conduction is used in such fashion, it's like saying magic. It feels like an explanation, but it's not.
Hence, fake explanations.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot. I think it's a really succinct and awesome and super memorable lesson. Like I've never forgotten this parable since the first time I read it.
Yeah.
I've not only not never forgotten it, but I catch myself doing this, and I try to stop and be aware of the fact that like it's like, wait a minute, I actually don't assign very high confidence to that thing I just said. Do I actually know this, or did I just hear this somewhere and like it's just kind of been accepted because I heard it from maybe an authority figure, or maybe it was a scientific journal, but maybe it was a shitty one. Um, you know?
Yeah,
Yep.
I have a similar thing like that with my autobiographical memory. And so, like, when I think I remember something, I like will immediately be like, you know what? I don't know how strongly I remember that. And even if I did remember it strongly, it doesn't mean it really happened. And I think because of that accidentally like ingrained thought pattern, a lot of my actual memories get thrown into the junk bucket in my brain, and thus
Yeah.
my autobiographical memory is terrible. I doubt I'm missing anything important.
The less
I'm sure if it was important, I'd remember it.
the less tied you are to your specific memories, the less you need them to be intact when you're unfrozen.
Right. And also, I said that last one with a nod and a wink, but no one could hear that. So
Yeah, I need to like start being like, I don't know, describing our facial expressions and stuff.
Wink, wink, nudge,
insert
nudge.
joke. Exactly.
Raised eyebrow. Magic, you cry. That's not a scientific explanation. Indeed, the phrases because of heat conduction and because of magic are readily recognized as belonging to different literary genres. Heat conduction is something that Spock might say on Star Trek, whereas magic would be said by Giles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. However, as Bayesians, we take no notice of literary genres. It's really funny because I think a lot of Methods of Rationality was Harry kind of pattern matching everything to fantasy novels that he had read.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the
Explicitly in a lot of cases.
Yeah, well, I mean, the arc that we just started, the Azkaban arc, he explicitly thinks of it in the beginning as like, okay, I am finally getting my intro quest from my wise mentor, and soon I will be, harrowed and have this experience, but it will make me stronger for the future, and I can finally step into my destiny.
Yeah, he literally thinks of it in terms of like leveling up.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and completing this narrative arc that all heroes have to complete.
I think I remember a scene where he received something and he's like, aha, my first quest item.
Yes. Oh God, I remember when Dumbledore gave him the Father's Rock, and he tried to leave, and the door was locked, and Dumbledore was like, "You didn't take your Father's Rock." He's like, "Oh yeah, of course. You can't leave the area without taking the quest item."
Yeah, that was the line I was going to mention is that, oh yeah, it would be foolish of me to think the door would open before I put the quest items in my inventory. I feel like the bag of holding was a great little literary trick to like let him, play into that perfect fantasy of his where it's like, yep, this is my inventory, everything in this bag and my pockets.
I
Absolutely.
want one so bad.
Yeah.
I just want Hammer Space to be real.
Hammer space.
I think it's a TV tropes thing. You know,
Okay.
like
What
in
is-
cartoons where a character will pull a very large hammer out of their pocket.
Oh, okay,
It's just
okay.
nonsensically big.
Yeah.
Did you see Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking of that scene.
Yeah, Eneash, have you seen it?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you haven't, it's a treat. At the end, John Mulaney, the pig, gives him his hammer.
That was
and
John
as they're all
Mulaney?
leaving. Yeah, and so he's like, "Here, take this hammer," and it's like huge. He's like, "It can fit in your pocket." It
And he said it while crying because like they were all leaving.
was perfect.
All right, on to guessing the teacher's password.
Yes.
Yeah, trying to see if there's anything else that we missed.
I guess the one thing from the very end that I would like to point out before we go is that he says the deeper error of the students is not simply that they failed to constrain their anticipation. The deeper error is that they thought they were doing physics, even though they were simply just moving their magic from one literary genre to another.
Love it.
Yeah. The thing
And I
that
can see-
oh, go ahead, Steven.
I was just gonna say really quick. I can see how this post flows into the next one. I think that might have been actually how this worked in reality, rather than my initial guess of like just like kind of separating them into two. I think often like he'll make a couple of points in a post, and then there'll be discussion, and he's like, okay, yeah, I can further elaborate on this point, and that's what this next one is. But what were you gonna say, Jace?
I was gonna say, oh, did I just forget it? Hang on.
Oh no, that's on me.
Oh right. I think at least you could imagine that this somewhat corrects itself later on when you say like graduate from physics school and start working in a physics lab, and now you have to care about what reality is or isn't doing.
Yeah, but like almost every student in high school went through a physics class where they had to repeat these words, and a minuscule fraction of them will actually go to a physics lab. So most people learned
Yeah.
the wrong lesson.
What's the wrong lesson that they could learn?
The wrong lesson is that the thing that you do is not try to constrain anticipation. The thing you do is try to guess the teacher's password.
Oh, sure, but I think even for the non-physicists to come out of this lesson, they're going to say, oh yeah, sometimes I'll be confronted with a problem that I was trying to answer incorrectly.
Oh, you mean this specific lesson? Yeah, I think everyone would get the right lesson from this one, but I mean from physics classes in general that do not have this specific trickery in them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's unfortunately school in a nutshell.
For most
So,
people.
yeah.
My physics class
Yeah.
was amazing because my physics teacher like really cared about physics.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mean to generalize over much, but if it wasn't physics, it might have been biology. It might have been one chemistry teacher you had or something.
Right.
But I think it's even just math, where like it's not supposed to be password guessing, but often you're just like trying different things. Like I remember that on multiple choice math questions where it'd be, okay, let me try this function. I remember them showing us at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, the answer I got isn't any one of these four. Let me try this other one because I just didn't understand what I was doing.
Yeah, they
But-
teach math terribly. They have you just like the thing that always bugs me is that when students I hear this story from so many people, when a student has figured out a way to solve a problem that's not the official algorithm, then they will get yelled at and told to do it the correct way. we're learning this one, and I'm just,
Yeah.
it's like they don't
Yeah.
actually want kids to understand how math works.
Yeah, that stupid like multiplying thing where like they're drawing lines between the numbers or something. I've seen.
Are you
Luckily, they
talking
started
about
right after
Common
I
Core?
must be. I think so. Yeah, that rings a bell. That would drive me insane. That would not help
I
me multiply in my head.
I had to I was helping kids with homework when I worked at the library. There's a school across the street, and kids would all come over, and I had to use YouTube videos to teach myself how to do the Common Core version that they were expected to do. And actually, I think that it makes sense as an introductory long, what was it, like long multiplication.
Yeah, it's just a different algorithm to get the same answers.
Yeah, my problem is that if they make you do it that way, and if you just do it another way, they're like, no, sorry, you didn't draw the lines and fill in the little, partial numbers above the lines. I feel like if you get the right answer, that should be the right answer, and they shouldn't care how you get there, which all the good teachers did. I don't know if they're allowed to do that now or how that works, but luckily I'm not in school, so
Yeah.
those poor fuckers.
It's good at guessing the teacher's password.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one's a lot of fun. I don't have to take charge on it. I'll just say that this is another one that I never forgot, and I think that it's. Yeah, dive into it, Inyash.
Okay. It starts off with EY relating how he thought that he knew what light was at 9 years old because he read up on it, and he read that light is made of waves. And then later on, when he actually did a lot more reading on physics and contemplating and realizing how light worked, he realized that when he was 9, he didn't know shit. He just knew the phrase light is made of waves and believed that. And he says that there's this instinctive tendency to think that if a physicist says light is made of waves, and the teacher says, what is light made of? And the student says waves, then the student has made a true statement. But he says that this is just a sequence of syllables. The sequence of syllables made of waves, or because of heat conduction, it's not a hypothesis. It's just a pattern of vibrations traveling through the air. And in school, a teacher hands you a gold star, or an A or whatever, for saying made of waves, which must be the correct answer because the teacher heard a physicist emit the same sound vibrations. And since verbal behavior is what gets the gold star, students think that verbal behavior has a truth value. After all, either light is made of waves or it isn't, right? And then he says, ties it right back into the last into the last post. If a teacher asks you why the far side of a metal plate feels warmer than the side near the radiator, if you say, I don't know, you have no chance of getting a gold star. You don't even get credit for class participation if you say, I don't know. So all the incentives are aligned for you to make some sort of guess, no matter how bad that guess is. And if you've heard phrases that the teacher have said in that semester that are like because of heat convection or because of heat conduction, then maybe one of those is what the teacher wants. So you say, maybe because of heat conduction? But that's not a hypothesis about the metal plate. It's not even a proper belief. It's just an attempt to guess the teacher's password.
Yeah. So I remember being
Mic
in
drop.
classes where the students were actually encouraged to make as many random guesses, like as I don't know, as like class participation, and
Yeah.
like there's no wrong answers, or like I don't know, but like just shouting whatever random thing you can think of is very much an example of this thing.
Yeah. And that's,
And it's not even like trying to generate a bunch of hypotheses.
no.
Like that's really what you should be doing. You should be maybe actually like guessing a bunch of random things, but then maybe you make like a word cloud and
Right.
start making correlations or start testing some of the things. But
He said, like, if you actually believed that, because of heat diffusion, maybe you would start measuring a few different points with a thermometer at a few different times and trying to predict what it would say on the next measurement, Because then that's something connected to an experience rather than just a verbal behavior.
I remember, and it's really, it's hard to say, like, or at least for me to briefly articulate what the difference is between like knowing something and knowing the password. But I remember when I was reading the Feynman lectures, there was a part where, and like I'd known all these bits before, but he brought it home with one perfect example about how, how do I put this succinctly without taking 3 minutes? Like you've got a vessel of hot liquid, and why is it hot? Because all the atoms are in there are moving on average pretty fast. And why does it get colder? Because the fast ones escape, and they occasionally slow down inside. But the really fast ones get escape velocity from the surface, and that's why like a flatter, wider vessel will cool faster than a small, narrow one. Um, and the so like as the fast ones escape, the average velocity of all the molecules in the vessel goes down, so the temperature goes down. And this is why a spoonful of soup gets cooler when you blow on it. And I'm just like, that's perfect. I already knew that I could blow on a spoonful of soup and it would cool down, and I knew all the other parts involved. But tying, I think that was one of Feynman's just true gifts, that he could illustrate things in a way that sound kind of, and granted, a lot of his stuff is sort of like esoteric by everyone's day-to-day standards, but tie it down to something as mundane as like how you like blow on soup, right? Well, here's what's going on. I thought that was just outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
were asking, or you were saying that you didn't really understand the difference between knowing a thing and then knowing the password. I think,
I said I couldn't quickly articulate it.
yeah, I think I would quickly articulate it as a difference in having good or bad thinking habits. There's this automatic reaction that's kind of working on muscle memory or instinct, but actually taking the time to have epistemic humility and, first of all, admit that you don't know to yourself or to other people, and then try to figure out what to do from there. I think that's also an uncomfortable step for a lot of people to take.
Yeah.
People seem to
I
be
think
more
that's
comfortable
definitely-
with just making up a... Like, have you ever seen this kind of interaction between people where they see something weird? I don't know, like, they see a bug doing something weird, and they're like, oh man, what's that bug doing? And people will just be like, oh, maybe it's doing that thing. Yeah, okay. Like,
I
nobody
think,
like pulls their phone out to Google it or something.
yeah, I think a lot of I know Wes specifically in the Discord has a problem with EvoPsych, and I think a lot of it is because EvoPsych is more about guessing passwords than actually trying to create explanations.
Yeah, it's just his issue is that it's largely non-testable, which I think he takes his. I think he takes too much issue with it. There,
Yeah. I think some of it
There's a
is
lot-
obviously correct, but
yeah. There's inferences you can draw from comparing our behaviors to other animals, to looking at hunter-gatherers that are still living that way in modern day.
I do think he has a point that it is sometimes overused, especially in pop culture.
It very much is, and a lot of it is, well, like some of it is the social psychologists, but some of it's, and yeah, maybe more of it is like Psychology Today, or like whatever pop science outlet is interpreting whatever study just came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think all pop science is guilty of being abusable and like misinterpreted by the masses, right?
Well, they actually actively will change the meaning of something in order to make it more clickable. I remember distinctly there was this article that was published in some journal, I don't remember, but whatever site, whatever like Wired or whatever had, I shouldn't diss Wired, I actually like Wired. Whatever bad psychology publication had ended up writing an article about it for the masses, had titled it, what was it? It was autism, or autistic children are shown to have more masculine faces than average, lending some credibility to the belief that autism means like an extreme male brain. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. And then I read the article, and the article said that actually the children had more androgynous faces.
Huh.
Like, and it didn't, I don't think it mentioned anything about the extreme male brain theory. It was
Yeah,
just
using
like, it was
headlines is
literally
rather-
like, yeah, they were trying to find something
Yeah.
sensationalist and controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw one on, I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but since I don't follow any of that stuff, because mainly, like, those resources, they always, I read once a month or I hear secondhand once a month, and then I'm shown an article about how we're going to be destroyed by a meteorite or something, and it's like, oh no, it's passing within 1,000 kilometers of us. We'll be fine. Like I remember at some point someone last year asked me like, "Hey, is there like are we gonna get hit by a meteorite next year? Has this crossed your radar yet?" And I was like, "No," and I'm pretty sure if like it was gonna happen, I would have heard about it. Um,
Right.
so I didn't even feel the need to look into it. I did remember that at some point Stephen Colbert had on Neil deGrasse Tyson and asked him about it, and he shut it down. But um, what was I gonna say? It was like vapors. People who use nicotine or who vape to get nicotine have like the same cardiovascular issues or can have the same cardiovascular issues as people who smoke. And then the sample size consisted 100% of people who used to smoke.
There's so much data manipulation going on in vaping studies, and I, I think I think some of it is the tobacco companies trying to badmouth vaping because they're taking their business away, and then a lot of it is
Ah.
just people that want to demonize whatever is like the popular thing.
Yeah,
I
does
remember
is that what it is? Just people hating things being popular?
this is a trend that I see all the time. Remember, like people are eating Tide Pods, and then suddenly it was like all teenagers are now eating Tide Pods, and here's why you shouldn't. And I was looking for.
Now it's just the president.
Oh, here's a yeah. Here's the thing. I was looking for engagement rings because Phoenix and I might do that, and I came across a photo of someone who had these transdermal implants of like 3 diamonds in their finger, and it was I suddenly remembered this article. It came out like a few years ago, but it was like millennials are ditching the traditional wedding ring in favor of implantable like piercing. It was like one person had done this. Somebody had seen the photos of it and just made the next logical leap, which is like this entire generation is going to stop buying wedding rings and get transdermal implants instead, which I think I saw it on Tumblr originally, which was they had just kind of taken whoever posted it had taken a screenshot of mainly centered on the title, and you could see some of the article, and they just wrote in all caps, "No, they're fucking not."
Yeah, millennials are killing the diamond industry, and it's just I work at a grocery store.
Good,
It's
kill
like
the
the
diamond
reply, right?
industry.
Yeah,
Fuck the diamond industry. I don't want your
yeah,
blood
we didn't do
diamonds.
diamonds for ours.
Like you can make a perfect diamond so cheaply.
Yeah, that's mainly why I wasn't into it. And then yeah, diamonds aside, we can wrap up the password guessing, which is, I think, yeah, he relates back to the school system, and he says in the school system it's all about verbal behavior, whether written on paper or spoken aloud. Verbal behavior gets you a gold star or a failing grade. Part of unlearning this bad habit is becoming consciously aware of the difference between an explanation and a password. It happened to me when I was 9 years old, not because I was stupid, but because this is what happens by default. This is how human beings think, unless they are trained not to fall into this trap. Humanity stayed stuck in holes like this for thousands of years. And I think this is another good time to reiterate like how useful it is to read up on the history of science. I think part of the reason that science seems so like boring and opaque and just mundane to people is that people look at whatever interesting thing, like I can flip a switch on my wall and the light comes on the ceiling, and I have a vague-ish idea of why that happens, but like most people aren't inclined to like take it as like holy shit, you can just create light like that. It's not a miracle to them because they assume that the explanation is mundane because they know it's understood. But like there's such a difference between well, I guess to put it in historical context, like basically everything we know is not stuff that was like always understood. Well, essentially everything we know. And so there's just this tendency to like, especially when learning chemistry, you start with like the Bohr model or something, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, this is 200 years old. For the rest of human history, we had no idea what the fuck was going on.
Yeah.
But we're going to start with the thing 200 years ago because it's where we start chemistry.
Well,
And
it's not just that we didn't know what was going on, it's that we thought we did know because we had a password that was, fulfilling someone's
did it.
requirements. Yeah, exactly. Or not necessarily always God, but yeah, something like that. Like this is the case because of this belief that we have, but it feels like you know something and you have an explanation, but you really don't because you can't use that to constrain what you believe in any way. And so for thousands of years, you think you have an explanation and you don't look deeper.
Yeah, if you're wondering why lightning destroyed your neighbor's house, Thor did it isn't an explanation. Like, because then you won't be able to predict whose house is going to get struck next.
And maybe it's the guy that was pissing on Thor.
So, I mean, that's one way you could test it. You could see if the person was a blasphemer, and so was the next five. Or you could see, oh, that person had on a very decorative, aluminum or metal pipe sticking out of their house.
Or they had a very, very large tree that was the tallest tree in the neighborhood, like, that was actually sitting too close to the house, and some metal shutters.
Yeah.
To be a little specific.
Oh, is that what happened to your
totally.
house?
That's my working hypothesis.
Okay.
Have you ruled out the possibility that Thor just hates you?
I actually am more convinced that
Thinking
Thor.
about it.
I'm more convinced that Thor was trying to help, because that actually worked out pretty well for me. I was trying to sell this house. It wasn't that the market was terrible. I wanted to get out, so I got insurance money, which ended up being like more than I would have gotten for trying to sell the house. I got out quickly. All worked out.
Praise be to Thor.
Yeah.
Well, our next two Less Strong posts will be Science as Attire and Fake Causality.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Those are also both really good, memorable posts. What is the sequence these are all a part of?
I don't know. There was like no sequence breakdowns back in the day. There was just, a sequence of posts that were put out every day.
I feel like this is probably map and territory, which
that makes sense.
Like and to me, I think those are the ones. Yeah, a lot of those just stuck out really well for me, and so I remember both these next ones as well. And I can also recall times where I'm like, oh my god, that's what's happening right here in my life. Anyway, but we're not talking about those right now. We're talking about those next time. Right now, we're going to talk about a post on Slate Star Codex called Socratic Grilling, which, hey, kind of ties into all this stuff about password guessing and all that fun business.
Not only does it tie into it, he literally links to the Guessing the Teacher's Password post from here, so that was kind of cool. But it starts out with a fun dialogue between a teacher and a student that can be done as an audio drama.
Oh, I'll be the student.
Excellent. In that case, is it okay if I'm the teacher? Or you want to be the teacher, Stephen?
No, I'll be the other student who's not talking.
Do your Professor Quirrell voice.
Oh, really?
Do it.
Yes.
Okay. Hold on a second. Mr. Potter. Okay, there we go. I would say Mr. Potter to get in the mood. Mr. Potter, many diseases like the common cold are spread by germs when one infected person contacts another.
But I got a cold a few weeks ago, and I never touch anyone except my family members, and none of them were sick.
You don't need to actually touch someone. Sometimes it can spread through mucus droplets in the air.
And one time I was camping in the woods for a month, and then I got a cold, even though I hadn't been around anybody.
If it was spring, you might have gotten allergies. Allergies can feel a lot like a cold, but they aren't spread by germs.
It was fall?
Then maybe it was an unusual allergy, or some other condition.
Hey, wait. If germs are spread from person to person on touch, then why doesn't the government just mandate 1 week when nobody's allowed to touch anybody else? Then all the germs will die, and we'll never have to worry about germs again.
That's a good question. A lot of germs have what's called reservoirs in the environment, where they live when they're not infecting humans. Even if the government tried your plan, probably most sicknesses would come back from their reservoirs.
I've never seen a germ reservoir. Where are they?
They're not literal reservoirs like a water reservoir. That's just what we call it when germs live in bats or raccoons or something. That was kind of weird. I haven't done Quirrell in a long time.
That was
amazing.
amazing.
Was wonderful to listen to, though.
I just want to, make your Quirrell voice into, a text-to-speech. And have Professor Quirrell read me, fan fiction or something.
That would be awesome.
Anyway, so, notice a few things about this conversation.
First, it's really good that it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, the student was
Wait.
confused at many points and uh, noticed that they were confused, and it like raised that confusion immediately, which is a great habit to be in.
And the teacher like took the student seriously and answered him and addressed all his concerns.
Yeah, I liked that actually Scott said, surprisingly, teachers actually do a pretty good job of this in real life, which maybe just means he had better teachers than me, but I had some very good teachers.
I had some that would take it the exact opposite way, and
Yeah.
some that would indulge me to the point where they'd say, "I want to keep talking about this. Let come back after class or after school if you want, and we can keep going." The bad teachers would shut you down and say you couldn't talk for the rest of the week because they thought you were trying to make them look stupid. So
Oh, what a bunch of assholes.
Well, that's the well, we're getting a bit ahead, but that's kind of the point of the article.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think this is the main reason why a lot of people advocate for smaller class sizes, because you can't have too many students if you're going around and like actually making sure each one really understands what you're saying and letting them grill you until it clarifies the thing in their head, right? Like if you had to do this with 30 students one after the other, I mean there'd probably be a lot of overlap where one person asking would help clarify it for a bunch of people, but it could be a bit much if you have like 100 students. It might take
Yeah.
forever. So
um,
I think that's, in an ideal world you would have like one mentor and one student, right? And they would take
Maybe.
responsibility for that student and just keep going with them and help them get everything until they actually understood it.
I think it was the book I recommended a couple episodes ago to David and Goliath, which was by Malcolm Gladwell, where uh, they looked at the question of whether smaller class sizes are better than larger class sizes, and um, like the answer is kind of it depends, but not always.
Okay.
I'm going to recommend that book again.
nice.
Also, I'm going to write it down in the notes.
Yeah, I mean, so like the exchange here goes about as pleasantly as possible for the student who's asking questions, and like I alluded to, I had teachers in elementary school that were the exact opposite of this, and they took it as like a hostile, like you're trying to make me look dumb, then shut the fuck up. I have the power here, and this is actually great.
Teachers.
Right. But this is great. So they're able to say, hold on, I've got like this. If what you're saying is true, then I've got like this really obvious way that we can end all illness forever. And like that's actually a good question. And the teacher says that's a good question. So it's great. I love that.
Yeah.
There's the I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I was going to bring an example in from another thing, so we'll just keep running with the post. Go ahead.
Okay, so the second thing that he says about this is that to a hostile observer, it would sound like the student was challenging the teacher. The Snape interpretation, basically. Every time the teacher tried to explain the germs theory, the student pounced on a supposed inconsistency, with pounced in quotes. When the teacher tried to explain the consistency, the student challenged her explanations. And
Yeah, and I was going to say that in the first part, I forgot to mention this where he plugs guessing the teacher's password, that the kid's doing the opposite of that.
yeah,
They're not writing down a note that says, okay, diseases caused by germs, right?
yeah, they're trying to actually understand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I love the line, and the thesis of this post is you must never ever say that. Saying
Yes.
that is so bad. Smack down that student once, say, I think I know more about germ theory than you do. Make him feel like he challenged your authority, and that's bad. And the best case scenario is he'll never ask questions to resolve his confusion again. The worst case scenario is he stops feeling the confusion entirely, or stops thinking of forcing things to fit together and make sense as a desirable goal to have.
Yeah,
And that's how you get teachers' passwords.
exactly. The that to never ever say is the that the student is being a brat and challenging the teacher, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons I really love Methods of Rationality and Harry in that, because he is always trying to find the answers, and I think that's one of the reason some people hate Methods of Rationality, because they're like, Harry's just being a brat who thinks he knows everything, and yes, sometimes he is, but that's not like his intention. He isn't there to undermine people. He's just trying to find the truth.
I think a lot of I read somewhere that a lot of parents, in particular, disliked the Harry character. And
That was my observation.
okay, that was you. Yeah, I was trying to remember if that was on this podcast actually before I was on it. Um, yeah, it's very much the idea of children need to be subordinate to adults, kind of taking precedence over like caring about this child,
Uh,
knowing things, uh, being curious. It like if you see that exchange that we acted out, which was very fun. Uh, now you're learning a bunch of things you probably might or you might not have learned in the lecture if the student had not interrupted.
yeah.
I think that in cases like that, this is called Socratic Grilling because this is supposedly how Socrates taught. His students would have to kind of figure out their own shit. He would kind of guide them along occasionally, but like he wouldn't give them answers. He would be like, I don't know, what do you think?
A lot of the times in the Socratic dialogues, he would have a point, but he would never actually say his point. He would just keep asking questions that, as his interlocutor answered them, would bring them closer and closer to the point that he was making.
And then they find out the truth in a way that is going to, first of all, make them feel good about the fact that they figured it out. Secondly, they're going to remember it. And it's going to be a lot more important. And third, now they have a more solid model because they've explored the edges of it and they didn't just get a single word answer.
I mean, sometimes. Lots of times they ended with, like, Socrates, you're a dick, and walking off.
Yeah, us not forget that the character of Socrates was eventually killed because he was so annoying. So it's one, and the other thing that it didn't always lead to like a nice resolution of like, great, now we know. It's more like, great, I knew that you didn't actually know. So I've now proven that you don't know either, or that you believe you don't know either because I've grilled you down enough to where you realize that you were holding on to nothing. It's interesting. What was I going to say about?
Well, I think that's why this is called Socratic Grilling rather than Socratic Questioning, because with Socratic Grilling, it's a bit more directed than questioning, but it's also like the kid is trying to find out the answer as opposed to just leading someone to the conclusion that they don't know stuff, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
article says you need to think of it as Socratic grilling, like Socratic questioning, but a bit harsher and more confrontational in order to get to the point more quickly.
Cool.
And he adds, tolerating this is harder than it sounds. Most people can stay helpful for one or two iterations, but most people are bad at explaining things, so one or two iterations isn't always enough. I've had times where I need 5 or 10 question answer rounds with the teacher in order to understand what they're telling me. This process sounds a lot like, the thing you just said's obviously wrong. No, that doesn't make any sense. You keep saying it over and over. No, that's irrelevant. You're bothering me. You keep saying an obviously wrong thing. Oh, that word means something totally different from what I thought it meant. Now your statement makes total sense.
And
I
that,
just
that
had to read
sounds
that
like
out 'cause I
half
love
our
that.
discussions on the Discord.
Yeah, no, like this is often why people have conflicts. I think it's that people are they think they're having a fight about one thing, and it turns out that like they're both actually fighting about a different thing,
Yeah.
or the thing that they like care about or are trying to optimize isn't the thing the other person thinks that is. It's so common.
So I wanted to bring up a quick thing to backtrack just a little bit. You said that you quoted him saying that the thesis of the post is you should never ever say that to a student because the best case is he'll never ask questions again, and the worst case is that he stops trying to force things to fit together and stops thinking of things making sense as a desirable goal. I was like, I think there's other. I mean, I guess there's a whole spectrum between best case and worst case, but I ran into this quite a few times, like in me personally, that not it isn't always just giving up. Like sometimes there's flat out rebellion. There's like, oh yeah, well maybe you don't know shit, sir. You're trying to shut me down, and I think it's because you don't know anything. And I usually wouldn't say that like in class or anything, but I think this
In
is
your
the sort.
head?
Well, yeah, maybe in my head, but I think this is the sort of thing which will often motivate people to try to find answers on their own. But even more so, I think it will often motivate people to simply distrust authority because they're like, this person couldn't answer my questions, and when I ask some, they try to shut me down. So I don't think they know what they're talking about, and therefore I don't believe the Earth is actually round. And, you know, they start not believing anything said by authority and wanting to verify everything themselves and can embrace things like, sometimes it leads to good outcomes, but sometimes it can lead to things like vaccine denial or flat eartherism.
I've definitely run across teachers who I was pretty convinced didn't actually understand the subject that they were teaching. Like they have been taught it in this way, and then they were just repeating it. And it, like, I guess it's handed all the way down from whoever actually is the expert on the thing and helped write the textbook. But I think in that case, if you ask a question that the teacher doesn't know, it's too embarrassing for like social status reasons to
Yeah.
say, "Oh, actually, I don't know."
That is a really hard thing to do. Like,
Yeah,
I've had that situation come up a few times with like my little brothers when I was trying to teach them stuff, and they asked me questions, and I was like, "Oh shit, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, right?" And it's really easy to say that to your little brother. You're like, "I don't know. Let's find out together." But
not to your
much
boss.
harder. Yeah, exactly. Or if you're trying to teach a group of kids in a school, and half of them don't respect you anyway, I could see that being a much tougher thing to be like, "You got me. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Let's get back to this next week."
I had a couple of awesome teachers who, and it would be seldom where I would distract the conversation enough to where either A, they couldn't answer it, or B, they'd be allowed to go on that long because they do have to get through their lesson plan. But they would come back the next day, and I remember at least two or three different teachers in high school. I had such a good high school overall teaching experience. I had one teacher come back with a lot of times they'd come back with answers like the next day because they went home when they were curious too because they actually liked the subjects they were teaching. I had
Awesome.
one come back with some printed paperwork and they're like, "Hey, I found that thing we were talking about the other day."
Oh, cool.
I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Fuck yeah! Now we
Yeah.
both get to know."
I've had
And
like, oh, you weren't done, glad.
no, no, please.
I was just gonna say I've had similar experiences, and those are my favorite teachers. Like this person cares about knowledge and learning.
Yeah.
Imagine.
I mean,
And they want to know more about their subject too.
this sort of
Like
thing.
they realized that they had an exposed ignorance and they're like, "Oh, you know what? I should know that." And now I'm curious because I actually like this subject.
Yeah, this sort of thing, this whole, don't question me, you think you know everything, is one of the things that led directly to my deconversion from religion. Because I was like, well, I don't think you know if you can't answer me, and I'm not just going to take your word for it, and I'm going to go look some more for myself. And so, the whole rebellion in that case was a very good thing. It isn't always necessarily, but, I think it can have good effects as well, but in general, I completely agree that the you must never ever say this is something that should be drilled into all teachers, and maybe they should be taught how to accept that sometimes they won't know things and they should not shut people down if they're asking.
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways that the school system should be reformed.
Yeah.
So this actually connected to something kind of upsetting that happened to me recently.
Oh,
Uh,
real quick before we go that, can I say one final thing on the post?
yeah,
Okay, Scott says near the end that one of the most important rationalist skills is noticing your confusion, which was, and he linked back to that Less Wrong post again. But that depends on an even more important proto skill of wanting things to make sense. And I agree that that is one of the things I most want to instill in all humans, the desire for things to make sense, and that this sort of smacking people down when they're trying to make things make sense is horrible for society. And I agree absolutely with this post, and this is one of the reasons we're boosting it, because, yeah, that's a major issue.
yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree. I got one quick side note. Did anyone hear the cat meowing?
I did.
I hope. Oh, good. I hope that picked up for the audience. That was my cat Zelda making a cameo. She doesn't usually come in and say hi when I'm in the office.
I have a
So
cat too.
that was really cute.
I don't know if you'll be able to hear her because I have it, but you can see her
My-
over the camera.
Oh, hey.
Mine does not let me pick her up. So anyway, yeah, the thing about the insight about like people not needing things to make sense. I think that actually is a bit of an insight. I it didn't like strike me as this hammer blow to my brain, but it did articulate something because like it's often so often, especially back when I was having more discussions about I don't know confusing subjects with people, and they'd be fine with bad answers. I'm like, how could you not want to know the truth? And they're just like, I just don't care. That sort of mindset is so alien to me that like it's like I can't even really model it. but this is a nice, succinct way of explaining A, how that might have come about, but B, just it was just another reiteration of like, yeah, some people just don't have that built in as a thing to desire. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so that's the problem we should be solving. Not make them understand stuff, make them want things to make sense. Then they'll want to understand stuff themselves.
Yeah. So you had a just bad thing that happened in your life recently, Jace?
Yeah, actually, this is even more relevant now that we had that little outro. Uh, I was, I think, last episode talking about a Discord group that I'm a member of that's some local Denver, like 20, 30 somethings, with a lot of like cool interests. And they were sharing, like, for example, they were doing this kind of special interest webcam thing where people would make a presentation about something that they thought was cool or that they're an expert in that they wanted to teach to someone else. So it was a little bit shocking when one of my rationalist friends, who I added to the Discord, I think linked a post from Slate Star Codex in response to something that somebody was asking about. And
Uh-oh.
yeah, and
I know where this is going.
yeah, you know, because you were. It's really funny. Before we were recording, Ineash just texted, "Man, like, do you guys know about what did you say? Like, do you know what sea lioning is?"
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was like, I got this like chill down my spine because I was like, wait, did you read my mind?
No, it's just that I've hated the Sea Lioning comic for a long time, and this immediately brought it to mind.
Yeah. So hang on, pulling my thoughts back together, time stamping. So it turns out that a bunch of people in this group are part of the social justice movement. And they don't like Scott Alexander.
He's a Nazi, don't you know?
Yes. He's a Nazi. He wants, like, eugenics to be a thing. He hates feminism. And I forget what else he was accused of. But, yeah, a bunch of people just kept dogpiling on the person who had posted the thing and going, oh, haven't you heard that, like, this bad thing? I don't know where they were going. They're probably like some social justice receipts website, but they managed to find like they managed to find a post that Scott had actually titled or wrote as a caveat in the beginning. I think this is probably the most controversial post I've made, and like I really hope that this doesn't get taken out of context or something. And sure enough, like this person's like, oh man, he said like this. What was it? Oh, I know what it was. It was the one where he was talking about Scott Aronson, who was often confused for Scott Alexander due to their similar names. And it was the
Untitled, right?
yeah, the one about feminism. Is that Untitled?
Untitled was also about feminism. He's done more than one post on it, but I think Untitled is the famous one.
Okay.
But, well, famous for being quote-unquote controversial.
Yeah. So, if listeners haven't like read Untitled, I'll want to explain what it is after I describe this interaction. A person found this post, pulled out a bunch of quotes out of context that said things about feminism being bad, and said, "Oh yeah, like this guy is the worst. He hates women. He, blah blah blah." And I think in particular, somebody else jumped in and said, "Oh yeah, I've like always hated that author. He only hates feminism because some feminists were mean to him in college." And the person who had posted the original article said, "I don't think he ever said that." Like, no, definitely he said that. Well, where did you see it? Oh, I don't know, but I definitely said it. Well, could you provide any evidence of this? Because and maybe like read the whole post that you're linking from. So like the discussion was the rationalist person was doing Socratic grilling. And I read back through, I thankfully was not a part of this conversation. I got dragged in after the fact, after things had kind of cooled down and they closed the thread and everything. And the rationalist got kicked out of the group.
Surprise.
Uh, and yeah, I read through the conversation. The way I was reading the tone was very much like the same tone that the kid in this article was using. Like, where did you hear that? Uh, like, how do you know that that's true? Um, are you sure about that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I have this other evidence that says this other thing. And people got very upset because they thought that he was being hostile and fighting with them by asking questions like, can you show me some evidence for that thing? Because that seems completely incorrect.
I love that the
How dare you
Redshlist.
try to understand?
Yeah, I love that the Redshlist community has this norm of it is never bad to ask for sources. Like, people may
Yeah,
not give you sources, they may not have them on hand or may not have the time, but no one's ever going to get mad at you for asking for a source.
yeah, like I love hanging out with rationalists because I've had the experience so many times of just somebody, I don't know, is talking about a thing. You ask, like, oh, how does that work? Oh, I don't know actually. And then both of you pull out your phones and look it up. Or you go ask another person at the, like who's the expert and whatever, and it becomes a discussion. Normal people don't do that, and it's baffling to me. Actually, one of my earliest experiences with Phoenix was we were driving around, probably going to Chipotle, and we're talking about livers for some reason, uh, liver transplants in
Okay.
particular. And so livers can be cut up. Like, you don't have to. First of all, I was like, wait, liver transplant? You only have one liver. Like, are they from cadavers? And Felix was like, no, I'm pretty sure that you can get them from. You can be a liver donor. Like,
Yep.
and
Livers
it's
apparently
fine.
have Wolverine's mutant healing factor
Yeah. So
You can
we.
also donate lobes of your liver, and
because,
so
yeah, they
and
regenerate
thus
like
survive
Wolverine.
the. Yeah, if
It's
only
so
at that
fucking
speed,
cool.
but basically.
But but then we were like, but then like, how does I don't know, like how does certain medications poison your liver if it can grow back so well? And we start like, we're just still driving to Chipotle, but Phoenix was on their phone looking up these answers, and then we were like having this whole discussion about it, and I was just like,
Awesome.
this is a very refreshing conversation to be having. Like, finally. Uh, so back to the original conflict, I guess I'll call it. Or maybe I could use the less like charged word interaction. No, it was definitely a conflict. People were upset. Uh, After the rationalist had posted the thing, a bunch of people got upset. The person who was moderating the channel, the Discord, I guess the server, yeah, the server, private messaged him and said, "You need to either apologize to the people that you harmed, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave this group." And the rationalist was
Harmed.
like, "Nah." Left.
Yeah,
It's like, nope.
I
I've
think
I've fallen prey to this particular. Actually, like specifically, he's like, I've fallen prey to this particular trap before, so like, no thanks. And I asked him about that after the fact, and he said that actually he had been in a group that did this exact same sort of thing. And after he came out and apologized, it was like now like he was the lowest person on the totem pole. So it was like everybody's still like, oh, that's the bad guy. Like, and also I guess he like lowered himself in status by apologizing, and therefore that they were like continuing to make him like prove that he was sorry about that thing he said that one time.
Well, now everyone knows he might be a Nazi.
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
fuck all that. I think the misappropriation of the word harm over the last like decade has driven me a little insane about it.
that
Like,
was gone.
well, I'm just saying, like, you didn't harm anybody by asking questions. It like it's not impossible to imagine that you could cause someone stress by asking them questions. If you're causing people stress by asking for sources, then they're stupid people who should be stressed, and they need to work out what's stressing them out about that. But and I realize that's a pretty sweeping statement, but what can I say? That rustles my jimmies. Um, like I the idea that like, oh no, this person said something offensive, I've been harmed. I don't know, for whatever reason, that's one of my berserk buttons. I feel harmed hearing people use the word harmed the wrong way. Um, that was a joke. So I just needed to interject there. But what was the you said that this tied into, well, sea lining?
Yes.
Yeah. So after the rationalist was kicked out of the group, which I'm still going to call it kicked out because, like, being forced to like prostrate yourself and apologize for something that's totally bogus in my opinion. It's clearly just a social power play, and that was just a trap. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it was bullshit.
I mean, technically, they elected to leave by not submitting beneath the authority that said you have to apologize for doing the right thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's as much as being kicked out as just getting a quick ban.
Yeah. So I'll post a link to this comic. There's this comic somebody wrote called Sea Lioning, where
Ooh, can I describe it?
oh yeah.
Okay, because I personally kind of hate it, and it is like famous now in a number of internet circles. But basically, it starts out with a racist saying, "Man, I really hate people of this race," and they're out in public, and a person of this race overhears her, and he's like, "Hey, why do you hate people of my race?" And she's like, "I don't want to talk to you." It's like, "Come on, what's the deal?" And basically, the comic is about how annoying it is when people who are discriminated against are want to know why you hate their people so much, and that's not how it is ever pitched when you see it online. Because when you see it online, people are like, "Oh, you're coming in here and you're just like asking all of us to prove these things, and we don't have to prove anything to you." But like, when you look at it, it's about a racist being challenged on her casual public racism.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, so I think off air, Inash and I had an articulation for myself of what sea lining is, and so like there's the deliberate version where you can go. So you're right, that is different from how I ever see it used.
Yeah.
I usually see it used as blaming somebody for saying, "Oh, you're sea lining," by which they mean you're coming in here and asking questions in bad faith to spark stupid conversations.
Yeah.
And so it can be used as a charge against somebody, like accurately or inaccurately, or it can be used like if you're going to say, "This will be really funny. I'm going to go in and sea lion r/conservative,"
And it's
I
called
feel like
banned.
it's called
in fact,
what?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it's called sea lining in specific because if anyone hasn't seen the comment yet, the racist is racist against sea lions. And they're like, "I don't mind most sea mammals, but I could do without sea lions." And then the sea lion is like, "Pardon me, I couldn't help but overhear. I would like to have a civil conversation about your statement. Would you mind showing me any evidence of any negative thing any sea lion has ever done to you?" And the lady's like, "Go away." And she's like, "There's no need to raise your voice. I'm right here. I'm just curious if you have any sources." And the lady's like, "You're in my house." And now the next panel is like several hours later, she's trying to go to bed. The sea lion is there in your bedroom. It's like, "You made a statement in public for all to hear. Are you unable to defend the statements you make? Are you simply unwilling to have a reasoned discussion?" And then it's the next morning at their breakfast table, and sea lion is still there. And he's like, "I have been unfailingly polite, and you two have done nothing but be rude." She's like, "I'm trying to eat my breakfast." Sea lion says, "Very well. We shall resume in an hour." Which is admittedly a great punchline. But,
And you've done a great job conveying the annoyance of the sea lion in your rendition of their voice, and like I thought that was hilarious. I immediately hated the sea lion, even though that they're technically in the right.
yeah.
I know, well, they're asking a fair question, but they're being super annoying about it.
And it's usually used by social justice types who, say something about like, "Man, these Nazis suck." And then someone is like, "Hey, I just want the right to own guns as defended in the Constitution. Why does that make me, the equivalent of someone who murdered Jews?" And they're like, "Stop, go away, you stupid Nazi. We know that you're not really here to have a civil conversation. You're just trying to troll us and degrade the community and all that." And the Nazi's like, "No, really. I just, I'm all for states' rights. I don't have anything against black people." And they're like, "Get lost. We've had this conversation before. We know where it's going." And so, in one sense, some people are correct when accusing people of bad faith for those questions, because there are a lot of people who do that in bad faith. But more often than not, I've seen the term sea lining in practice used just to not ever have to make any sort of defense of your assertions. Like if someone asks, "Why do you think that Scott Alexander's a Nazi?" And they're like, "Oh, what? You guys sea lining me now? Everyone knows Scott Alexander's a Nazi. Just read his blog."
Just read my collection of out of context quotes
Yeah.
from his blog. Uh,
This was right around when I left Facebook forever. Somebody was they brought me in because I met them at a party, and they were in an argument with somebody that they knew who was like a master's biology student or something. And the person that was posting was like, "Oh, Richard Dawkins is this terrible misogynist pig or whatever, racist or something. I forget what it was." And my friend chimes in and she's like, "Hey, can you like help back me up here?" And I come in and I'm asking like, "So where does he say this?" And she's like, "Oh, it's complicated. You need, I'm a master's in biology. You would need or maybe a doctorate, or you need a professional understanding." I'm like, "I need a professional understanding to follow a link to a post or to a page source. Like, what the hell are you talking about?" And it was just, I guess I'm not sure which of us in that situation is the sea lion. I guess me, because I'm asking for sources,
Yeah.
but I was doing it in a good natured way. Like, I mean, I was shutting down who I thought was an idiot, but I wasn't doing it uh, rashly. I'm starting to see why you hate the word sea lining.
Yeah. Well, that's when I read this post, I immediately thought of sea lining, because what Scott Alexander is saying in his post is that, you know, asking questions is a good thing. It helps people get to the truth, and you shouldn't slap down people who are trying to get the truth, especially if they're students in a classroom. But in general, if someone's like trying to explore a subject, that's a good thing. Don't try to stop that. And sea lining is literally or accusations of sea lining is literally the exact opposite of that. It's if someone comes in asking questions, it means they're trying to destroy your community and disrupt things, and you should immediately shame them and or kick them out of the group instead of engaging them, because there is no good faith to be had here at all. And it's like the stark contrast between the two like jumped to my mind immediately as I was reading it, and is
yeah.
again why I love Scott Alexander and dislike people who bring up sea lining as a defense for their stupid shit.
So I can kind of steelman sea lioning.
Mm.
Uh, I have been in conversations where, like, say that you're in a forum talking about some specific programming language, and somebody comes in there and is clearly like asking questions in bad faith. This is, I feel like it needs to be a more like charged thing. Like, say that you're in a geology forum and you're a geologist, and some like flat earther comes in and just incessantly, like, every single thread of the forum is now like full of this person,
Yeah.
and they're armed with their many questions that like they pulled from a bunch of websites for, oh yeah, well, what
Carbon
about
dating
Noah's Ark?
works. Yeah.
Yeah. uh, so, and I've even seen on feminist blogs, you'll get some guy that's just there to fight,
Hmm.
and they'll be like, well, did you know that uh, I don't know, like stuff about.
The thing is, like, I see that too, and I think the best way um, to combat people who are arguing in bad faith is just to say, hey, you are not engaging anything directly. I think you're arguing in bad faith, and I'm not going to continue doing this. It's not this whole, haha, you're a sea lion, ignore the troll thing, because
Mhm.
that's,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. The the example that I kind of steelmanned is really more of a description of a troll, though. I
yeah.
mean, maybe there's like some slight differences there, so I could see why you'd want a different word for it. But like, I'm looking at the comic now, and I remember the main thing that like pissed me off about this comic when I first saw it is it starts out with it's actually got this like steampunk aesthetic, which is kind of funny. But like, there's a man and a woman in some kind of like steam powered cart, uh, and the sea lion pops up next to them, and then it's like following them down the street, and then it's in front of their house, then it's in the kitchen, then it's in her bedroom, and then it's the next morning. Um, but this is stuff that happens on the internet.
Yeah.
You can't. I guess people can think of their forum as their house, but the thing is, like, a forum is a public space, and unless I don't know,
A
like,
lot of people,
what?
yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't treat their online places that way. They're like, get off my blog, and it's like, you could just ban me, or I don't know, like if they post on Facebook something that people then are like, well, hold on, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, and they're like, leave me alone. I didn't post this to be engaged on it. It's like, you posted it on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's like a platform meant for social engagement.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, like they're not in your house, they're not following you around. if you're continuing to engage in the conversation and they're continuing to engage back, that means you're having a conversation. You could tell them, like, honestly, I'm really exhausted and kind of depressed today, and I just don't have the spins to have this conversation with you right now, but here's some helpful links or something like that.
Or you can do what I do and just ignore them, because you don't
Or
have
you
to
can
reply to them
ignore
because they're not
them.
literally in your house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could block them. I mean, like, yeah. So, like, there's, like, this weird kind of, like, somebody trying to play victim when I don't think they have a case for that.
I've literally been on a panel with someone at a writers con, and someone, I forget exactly what the topic was. It was some sort of cultural warfare topic, but someone on the panel like got all indignant and was like, "You come into my house and you tell me XX to my face." And I'm like, "Okay, I am also indignant with you because you are in the right on this topic, but this public gathering is not your house. No one came into your house and said anything to your face. We are at a panel in a hotel where people have been invited to come. Like, no one came to your house, bitch."
I know. Uh, yeah. I guess to bring it back, though, so I forget if I actually said that the rationalist who got kicked out of that group was later accused of sea lioning.
I mean, I knew it was going
It
there.
became pretty obvious, yeah.
Yeah.
But so looking at that conversation, though, it really seems to me to be a failure of, well, first of all, kind of the thing we were talking about before, of understanding where both people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I think people should do double crux. Double crux is, or there's like Gottman Rappaport. All right, unpause. So it's kind of like the Gottman Rappaport intervention, which is actually like a couples therapy technique that I think I have mentioned before. I'll put a link to it though. Both of these conversation styles are based on one person talks while the other person is silent and listens and maybe takes notes. When the first person is done, the second person has to reiterate what they said in their own words. So my understanding of how you're feeling is like these things, you think that this is true, and you're worried that this is going to happen. Is that right? And then you say yes or no, and if it's no, then you have to keep explaining it to you in different ways, and you keep rephrasing it until you feel like you both understand the person's position. And then you switch speaker and listener. And this kind of, this really should be normed for conflicts because, like, most of the time, or at least in a lot of conflicts that I've witnessed lately, it tends to be about people arguing about different things or misunderstanding each other's positions, not even about the subject at hand. And it's so frustrating watching that happen. And that was very much what happened in this case. There was a cultural clash. There's the social justice people, and there's the Socratic Grilling people. So the social justice people care about not having people's feelings hurt, not making people uncomfortable, and protecting people they perceive to be disadvantaged minorities from people of a different group. And yeah, the rationalist that was posting the article was a cis white guy, so points against. And
How dare he be cis and white?
Oh, racism is tight.
Yeah, so the other thing that made it awkward is that the rationalist is autistic. A bunch of people in this group are also autistic, so like it's weird because it's like people have empathy for other people until they think that they're on the enemy's side, and then suddenly like the empathy turns off, and they're like, where before they're like, oh, this person just sometimes phrases things strangely because they struggle with understanding like the way people, I don't know, express their feelings. But when they're in the conflict, then it's just like, oh, you're just willfully misunderstanding me, and it's like, no, I literally want to know, like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
The rationalist cares about having correct models, and so, like, I was reading, the conversation, and nowhere did I see anywhere where the rationalists seemed to get mad to say like anything that just was meant as a retaliation. They just kept asking, like, I don't know where you got this from. Like, can you please explain why your models are like this, and like, and
Yeah, it's
people are
all
like, you're
perfectly
oppressing
hilarious
me.
yeah. No, yeah, it's all perfectly hilarious from inside our own little sanity bubble, but like it's just exasperating when you're either thinking of times this has happened in your life or you've seen it happen, and it's just I just don't have any patience for it. That's why I'm just a big fan of. I never have any trouble. Again, maybe I haven't been on Facebook since like 2016. I have an account to coordinate social events, and I updated my status when I got married, but like I don't think I posted anything in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it's so I think I remember I was drawn into some arguments at some point. I know I was in the early 2000 teens, but like I have no trouble now just like leaving a conversation. Like if they're left hanging, like cool, fuck them. Like, and it's not always a bad faith argument either. It's just like sometimes I just don't have the time or patience for it, even if it's a conversation that might be worth having. I just am not the one to have it with, and uh, I guess that's one of the main perks of Discord is that other people can kind of pick things up. Where if it's like a direct message, then like okay, well I have to reply to this. Which I like getting direct messages on Discord. All those are great. And if I got one I hated, I'd ignore it. There's yeah, there could be situations where like if someone is finding the time to just find you directly and bug you with stuff, then it's like, all right, cool. Well, I can reply or I can not. But I'm over the point now, and I guess I don't know quite what it's like to say now I have to reply to this. And it's like, no, you really, really don't. You can just go about your day and just let this person be wrong. And
But someone's wrong on the internet.
I know there's relevant XKCD, and it came to my mind immediately after I said it, but yes, somehow that is annoying, but maybe it's just a general level of apathy that I have where I'm just okay saying, fuck it.
I think.
But I think that might be actionable advice. That's the reason I'm going on about it.
Yeah, no, it's a reasonable response. I mean, you're just going to end up making yourself and other people upset and not really advancing either of your goals. I try to do a like tit for two tats strategy, kind of where I default to assuming good faith. I'll try to steel man someone's position and then like talk to them about it. If they just keep not engaging in the conversation in a way that feels productive, then I walk away after a few iterations of that. Like I've sometimes been able to have really great conversations with people where they do actually come away at least like a little bit more humble about their idea. Most often, that's not the case.
Okay, so we, real quick, don't shame and slap down people for asking questions to try to get at the truth. That's terrible and really hurts everything about society. Okay, on to listener feedback. Stephen.
No, that's a good. I think that's to be the ultimate takeaway. Yeah, I guess there's a quick one here from Supreme Switch on one of our Reddit threads from one of our episodes, and I just thought I'd give a quick my own quick answer on it, and
Oh yeah, this is from a
maybe your
ways ago.
guys's. Yeah, so I wanted to grab it because I felt like it was a quick one. We don't have a lot of time for a large section here, but basically they had said, I have to pause the episode a bit where you realize the intuition pump of how much debt would I be willing to take on to be in a universe where I have the thing I want. And so the thing I want is to work to work a non-labor job. So what, in your opinions, what trades / field, get a degree? Slashes. What trade field should I go in / get a degree if I'm willing to take out a student loan? And my own quick answer for that is like, I mean, for non-labor jobs, it depends on what you like. I didn't know I'd like programming. I enjoyed it. I recommend Automate the Boring Stuff to anybody who wants to give it a shot. You can Google that. It's a free book for Python introduction. There's W3 Schools that just shows basically a good crash course for several programming languages and tools. If you like that sort of thing and you find fun with it, it's the kind of thing you can get a job in 6 months if you go to a boot camp and get hired. Not non-programming jobs, I mean, or excuse me, yeah, non-programming, non-labor jobs. I mean, there's a zillion, right? There's anything business related if you want to be a manager of literally anything. I guess I don't have very specific advice outside of programming, other than it's easy to get into. But it's not for everybody. I totally acknowledge that.
Yeah, a lot of people, when that came up, I think a lot of people did mention programming boot camps. It depends. First of all, I'm assuming by non-labor he means, or they mean non-physical labor, because, pretty much everything is labor if you're working for someone else. But, like, I don't know, would working at a Starbucks count as physical labor? Probably, because you're standing and manipulating objects. I'm assuming this is like, sitting at a desk type job. And how much debt you have to get into one of those really depends on how much you want to make, because you can get into a lot of entry-level jobs with no degree at all. Like, I know this is, almost 20 years ago that this happened to me, but I dropped out of college and then became basically an office assistant, and it paid shit, like $9.50 an hour, but it was sitting at a desk, sometimes like getting up to file things and run copies and stuff, but it's not what one thinks of as a manual labor job. And from there, I worked my way up into accounting, which actually pays pretty darn decently. But if you're willing to take shit wages, there's a lot of things you can do. Being who's the person? Receptionist, a receptionist at a front desk, being an office assistant, doing data entry, a lot of things like that. There's some low-level accounting work, like accounts payable stuff, generally doesn't require schooling. So the amount of debt you have to take on could be very minimal to nothing. But yeah, the more debt you take on, the more likely it is that you can jump right into something that pays better and is more fulfilling.
And it depends on your proclivities too. Like, I mean, I did a boot camp that cost $16,000. But if you like people and you think you'd hate working behind a computer by yourself all day, I mean, and you want to eventually make money, but you're patient. That's another reason that I did a boot camp, is that I have no fucking patience. Be a teller at a bank, work your way up to management, work your way up to branch or to regional management. Then you can, do whatever you want. But I think I guess the question might be too vague. But yeah, Supreme Switch, feel free to hit, you can hit me up on Reddit if you want, or, join the Discord and tag me there. Career advice is not something I have a lot of comfort giving just in broad strokes, just because I don't know you or your situation, but, like if you're patient and you like working with people, there's a zillion options. And if you're impatient and don't like working with people, there are still lots of options.
I have a lot of comfort with giving people career advice, and have had many jobs and changed careers a lot. And actually, I really wanted to do an episode on career hacking at some point. As far as what job you should have, well, it really depends on your definition of labor. I wasn't sure if you just mean like you don't want to work at FedEx, stacking boxes, or at Amazon. But what about working for DoorDash or Uber Eats? Does that count as labor? There's all kinds of side gigs that you could grab in the meantime, or even like build into a career. Stuff you could do from home, like transcription. You need like a little bit of startup equipment for that, like a foot pedal to start and stop audio, so you can type maximally fast. If you can learn something like medical transcription or legal transcription, then you can make more money. There's Amazon Mechanical Turk also has like little mini, they call them hits. It's like a human something task. Things that still require humans that aren't fully automated yet, but they only take a few minutes, and you make like a few cents per, but you could just keep doing that. You could, go on Fiverr and do like, I don't know, whatever skill you might have, like say you can do graphics design, even if you can only do one specific thing.
I was trying to do it silently, but I realized I should have just said something. That pen clicking is insanely loud. It's way louder than your voice.
Huh.
Are you clicking a pen like this next to the microphone?
I'm clicking a pen. It's not near the microphone, but I guess the microphone loves that sound. I'm gonna just put the pen down, so
yeah, sorry.
I don't just do that by impulse. Should I just repeat the things I said?
I think it is
totally
edge around it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just figured that going forward it would have. I don't know what I was thinking with waving my hand. Like that wouldn't be distracting. Sorry, now you're gonna have to cut this out.
No, it's okay. It's totally. I want to encourage anybody to pause at any point. and like gather their thoughts or look something up or whatever. We have a better podcast that way once it's edited.
Right on.
There's the website 80,000 Hours is effective altruist specific, but they have a lot of career advice. There's people that'll coach you. There's also the Lesser Wrong article, which I believe is called Optimal Income. It's old now. It still works. It's about if you're under 30, you can get a working visa to Australia. You can get a lot of basic jobs that pay quite well. I think the one that they recommended in particular was working at a hotel, where I imagine you could probably work at a hotel and just be the person at the front desk that's not labor. But they give you, I think, about 40K annual income, and they also give you food and a place to live, because you could just stay in a hotel room, and they actually have these packages for their employees. And then it's not taxable, so you can send all of your money back to the U.S. So it's a way that you could just if you want to fuck off for a year and go bartend in Australia. Felix's brother did that.
Teaching languages in other countries is another option too.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's also boot camps. So if you're concerned about the money of going back and how much it would cost to go back and get another degree, first of all, I'd say if you have your heart set on something, fucking do it. We can get scholarships. There's grants out there. Even if you do end up going into debt, if you end up in a career that you love, you can pay it off, especially if you're smart. I went to a boot camp that was quite inexpensive. I managed to get a scholarship by just writing an essay about why I thought I would be good at the job. Luckily, my house had recently burned down and was struck by lightning, so I got noticed by the scholarship people. And but yeah, that's how I got into doing cancer research, and I didn't have to go to med school. But yeah, I want to do a whole episode on how you can do that. I have a lot of things to say about it, and this is going on for a bit.
Awesome. No, that's great. There's a lot of terrain to cover there. I think that's a good jumping off point for when we get around to an episode like that.
Yeah.
I this isn't quite specific, but I had to just throw out there that Rudy Hoffman emailed me after our last episode aired a week later, and he said that he had a handful of inquiries to get started with cryonics paperwork.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And somebody emailed us at the Bayesian Conspiracy and said that they'd signed up, or they had at least submitted the inquiry for it, and that made my day.
Yeah.
I hope none of us have to get frozen, but if we do, there's a non-zero chance that we'll get to reunite in the future, and I think that's just amazing.
Yeah.
That I don't know, even saying it puts a smile on my face, and I don't do a lot of stuff with positive externalities, so that made my day. So I had to share that right moment.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
There was this.
No, go ahead.
I was going to go on to the next feedback, but did you want to say another thing about that one?
No, I'm good.
Should I read this one from the great Nick?
Yeah, did we want to cover that one?
Yeah, if we can do so in somewhat shortish time.
Yeah. I think I can cover this quickly because it was just some advice. The great Nick was just writing to say that they heard the brief discussion at the end of our podcast about how rationality is too white. Slate Star Codex, of course, has a great discussion of this, and there's a link to Black People Are Less Likely, which I'll stick in our notes as well.
That sounds like a truncated title, but it's not, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the point, though, because it could be the title of many articles. They pulled out the most relevant paragraph. For the record, here's a small sample of other communities where Black people are strongly underrepresented.
Oh,
Runners.
and before you start, I looked it up just before we started this. Black people are either 12% of the U.S. population or 14%, depending on if you count mixed racial or not.
Runners, 3%. Bikers, 6%. Furries, 2%. Wall Street senior management, 2%. Occupy Wall Street protesters. Unknown but low. One source says 1.6%, but likely an underestimate. BDSM, unknown but low. Tea Party members, 1%. Tea Party. American Buddhists, about 2%. bird watchers, 4% environmentalists, Wikipedia contributors, atheists, vegetarian activists, yoga enthusiasts, college baseball players, swimmers, fan fiction readers, Unitarian Universalists.
They're all in the low single-digit percentages.
And then they finished it by saying, "You're probably aware of it, but it's something I also quote from when people complain about how white something is," which I was aware of it, and I guess
I thought of it explicitly.
This is not an answer to the problem of why black people are underrepresented. It just shows that they tend to be universally underrepresented. Go ahead, Anish.
Oh, no, no, go ahead. You go. Sorry.
Okay. I pretty much finished my thought. Just,
oh, okay.
Like...
Yeah, I also thought of this when we mentioned that. I didn't say anything because, like, we had covered this before, I believe, and like there just isn't too much for me to add. Like, yes, black people are less likely to get involved in just about every sort of special interest thing that there is in the U.S., and that's just a thing, and I'm not going to blame black people for that, nor am I going to blame white people for it. And if people bring up, well, your group is, you know, far more
exclusive
white than the U.S. average, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry for being born white. I wish I could help that, but I'm not going to go through all the effort that it takes to be transracial just to please you, you know? I don't...
I don't think that's what they're suggesting, but that's funny.
Okay.
I wonder, like, so the highest one on here is 60% bikers, which we would expect 14%, 13%-ish if it's going to be evenly distributed.
Mm-hmm.
The second highest is bird watchers, which I wonder if it's overrepresented. Because, like, I wonder if that, like, does that mean that, I wonder what percentage of bird watchers are any given group, but I think that 4% of, I don't know anyone who watches birds. I mean, I watch birds out the window, but you know what I mean.
But just, like, not professionally. Just casually.
Yeah, I'm a casual
amateur bird watcher.
Yeah.
I look at a bird occasionally.
I can recognize a robin in a what's the one, the national bird, bald eagle.
So by bird we mean the 60s English slang for chick, right?
Was it the 60s?
I just remember Austin Powers says it, and he was from the 60s in that movie, right?
But that was in the UK. Anyway, this is a digression.
Yes.
No, but the point stands, and I think that makes a good point. So, like, certainly it sounds like I don't have to take the criticism, well, rationality is disproportionately black, and that's a problem with rationality. Because it seems to be a problem, if it's a problem. I mean, people can do whatever they want, but if there is something keeping black people from being involved in whatever community they want, it doesn't seem like it's unique or even unusually prevalent in the rationalist community.
I think, a lot of activities, I don't even know, like, religions they have in here, whatever. A lot of stuff does tend to be overwhelmingly white and male, and there's probably a lot of really complicated factors that do have to do with having social privilege, probably like being wealthier, having more free time to pursue these activities, discrimination, whether like intentional or kind of unintentional, keeping people out. But like that's a big problem to solve, and we had mentioned in the show where we talked about this that like you can kind of do outreach, but that's like really what you can do. I mean, you can't just go like kidnap a bunch of like racially diverse people off the street and force them to join your cult.
You're one of us.
Or I guess you can, but you shouldn't probably.
Some of that is probably, you know, the privilege or resources as you were saying, but like there is no cost to getting into running or fan fiction reading or being a Unitarian Universalist.
The cost is time.
I guess. I don't know.
I mean, if you're poor and you're working 2 jobs and raising kids, you probably don't have time to pick up a new hobby like bird watching
or reading fan fiction. Like my general answer for this is that I think white people, and maybe white males more than white females, I don't know, but white people in general are just weird, and so they like find all these weird esoteric things that like, oh, that's super interesting, I'm gonna go do this thing for the next year or two, And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's awesome, and I specifically have some weird things that I'm into, but I don't think there's anything wrong with other people not being into that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I think
And
there's. Oh, you weren't done.
well, no, I see organizations sometimes really going very far to try to get their racial or whatever makeup closer to representing the average of a nation, and it seems to distort things a lot more than they necessarily need to be distorted. Like sometimes people just aren't interested in your thing.
Or they've never heard of it.
Yeah, like I mean, bikers specifically. Bikers is the highest one on here, and bikers is the most expensive one on here to do. Well, except for Wall Street Senior Management, I
It
guess.
depends if they're talking about. I don't know if they mean bicycles or motorcycles.
I assume they mean like bikers like Harleys, gangs, that kind of thing. Because no one says bikers for bicycles; they say cyclists.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you clarified. I assumed cycling, but yeah, that is called
They
cycling.
can both be expensive and time-consuming hobbies. Spoken
Right.
as someone who currently has an electric bike, a fixed gear bike, and a motorcycle that I'm repairing.
Yeah. But bikers is the highest percentage on there, and bikers is also the one that's going to cost you at minimum thousands of dollars to get into.
Yeah. Unless you find a really cheap motorcycle that your friend's ex abandoned, and you know somebody who's really good at fixing motorcycles for cheap. Haha. But
Speaking
but
of
I
time
have
consuming,
Congratulations.
yeah no I have networks though like that, so
Yeah.
it's hard to yeah.
nice.
Speaking
I
of
kind
time
of want to keep talking
constraints,
about the dynamics of this because it's interesting, but I think that maybe we should wrap up.
That's what I was going to get at. Is speaking of time consuming, this has been going on for a bit, and I've been at my desk for 12 hours and 30 minutes today because I didn't
Dang.
really take a lunch. So, no, I mean it's part of the deal, but that's all right.
Well, you should go stretch
but-
and eat some food.
I'm gonna. I didn't mention as this is pre-gaming, but I was talking with Enosh. I've been doing yoga the last few days. It's tight. I know one should
Oh,
do
hell
it.
yeah.
So everyone try yoga. You know, if it hurts, don't do it as hard. Like all the ones that bend over and grab your feet, I just lean over, but I keep my back straight and stuff. It's great.
don't
Try yoga.
Don't try yoga if you're a white oppressor though, because there's too many white people in it already.
Right. Yeah. This isn't talking to most of our listeners. Probably. I'm kidding. Everyone should do it. Who cares?
I've been doing
So,
yoga too.
Great. Yeah. We'll have to compare notes.
I could recommend a really easy, like, relaxing one. I'll put it in the show notes and I'll send it to you.
Awesome. Sounds good. And I think it's been a while since I've thanked a patron. I think it's probably been more than we don't really keep track, but I'm thanking this one. And I decided before we recorded I was going to rethank them, and I saw the name and I'm stoked. I get to thank Sandcat, who's been a supporter for a long time, and I see them on the Discord once in a while, and every interaction I've had with them is awesome. So shout out to Sandcat. Thank you so much for your generous support of our podcast, and really, since I've interacted with this person indirectly via the internet, I can say you're awesome too. So
Yeah, thank you, Sandcat. You helped make this thing happen.
yes,
We love you,
And-
Sandcat.
And Sandcat actually can make it happen in a more literal sense because they're donating at the tier that says they can co-host. So Sandcat, if you want to co-host and talk about something you want to talk about, or tell us how we're wrong about things, or anything at all, let us know because you have earned the privilege.
I reached out to them about that, and they're busy. But I think, this is a friendly ping. Keep this on your back burner. You're invited. So
Should we sea lion them until they get on the show?
So I hear you can co-host. Why haven't you done that yet? Can you give me any good reason why you haven't co-hosted yet?
good idea. Let's make them hate us.
That's
This is what
that's
you
how
get
we
for
get
donating
more.
to our Patreon.
Yep.
All right. Well, on the note where I've clearly lost my mind and can no longer form articulate sentences, I think we should cross it off here. So, I think with that, that's going to be our episode. And did we have our Let's Run posts for next episode?
Yes, we mentioned them.
Cool. Do you want to mention them again?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Let me scroll back. The next ones are Science as Attire and Fake Causality.
Huzzah.
Two good ones.
All right, people. Well, we'll see you again in a couple weeks. And everyone have fun and stay safe out there all the time.
Stay
Peace
healthy.
out, y'all.
Drink lots of water. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
All right.
Watch all the good TV. See ya.
Bye.